Hello, my name is John Mayer, and I'm the Executive Director of CALI, the Center for Computer Assisted Legal Instruction. The video you are about to watch is from the annual CALI conference held at the University of Michigan School of Law in Ann Arbor, Michigan on June 4th and 5th, 2026. Most U.S. law schools are members of CALI. CALI publishes over 1,400 interactive tutorials that teach the law to law students. Faculty can also use LessonLink to create formative assessments using CALI lessons. CALI publishes casebooks by paying law faculty to write and review books that can be adopted in many courses in law school. These books are free to download from our website, or print versions can be purchased at near cost. You can download the PDFs or even the Microsoft Word versions of most of our books and add your own commentary before distributing to your students. $300 casebooks are a thing of the past, and adopting one book from CALI saves you more than your entire institutional membership. If you would like to learn more, email me at jmayer@cali.org. I would be happy to visit or zoom into your school to talk about CALI.
Good morning. Good morning, everybody. Good morning, everybody. You guys are as bad as the students are. Let me welcome everybody on this beautiful day to Ann Arbor. Some of you, of course, are on the home team, but we have the pleasure of welcoming so many of you to what I think is not only the best, the grandest, but the most beautiful law school in the country. And we are thrilled to have you here. Some people were just saying that despite having made a mistake decades ago to choose some other law school, for one moment, we can all be here at U of M. But sincerely welcome on a stunning summer day in Ann Arbor. I'm Eko Yanka. I'm one of the associate deans here at the law school, and I have the great pleasure of welcoming you to kick off this conference that you know so well. So CALI is, as you know, one of the longest running conferences of legal librarians, information technicians, and information scholars. It's remarkable, having now gone on over 30 years, I believe 36 years, for bringing together a mix of people who view their facets of the law school from related but different roles. So I've been told, for example, it's 34% law librarians, 29% IT faculty, and 21% law faculty. Some of my faculty I see here as well. And I think that's a remarkable thing that you have for decades garnered such a mix of people to come talk, learn, and teach each other. Now, not only does this conference bring together such great people, but some of the people here have been invested in a deep and meaningful, long way. That is to say, some of the people here have been coming to CALI since its inception. At the same time, one of the things I got to notice was the kind of happiness of the little blue tags that say first-time attendees. And so the fact that you continue to refresh your community is really a testament to a vibrant organization. Congratulations on continuing that. We all know that these things are not easy to do. Speaking of people who've been involved for a long time, the University of Michigan has been involved in CALI since its very first meeting, and we are thrilled to continue that involvement. We are thrilled in particular that this is our first time getting to host CALI. And so, you know, what's the thing they say? Long-time listener, first-time caller. We feel like we've been a participant since its inception, and we are glad to take our turn hosting. That hosting is easy to say, especially for me, because there are a lot of people unseen who make these things go wonderfully and smoothly. I hope you get a chance to see our remarkable staff who are dedicated to making sure your experiences here are seamless. I always say it takes a lot of energy to make things seem effortless, but one person in particular deserves a round of applause. I know he doesn't go for these things, but Kincaid has worked not just hard, but with real affection to make sure that this conference could come here, be successful, and that he could be the host Michigan likes to be. And so I want to take a moment to recognize our own Kincaid. So with that, after 36 years, over 3,000 participants, 600 sessions, and in today's world, now available to ever broader people in and out of the room on YouTube and elsewhere, I want to welcome you, congratulate you, wish you a terrific conference where you learn from each other. And I will do what Associates Dean should do, and I will get out of the way and allow you to enjoy your conference. Welcome to U of M.
Thank you so much, Dean Yanka. For those of you who don't know me already, which is, I think, most of you, I'm John Jorgensen, a member of CALI. You can refer to me as the other John. A question for all of you. Are you fit for legal education?
Hello, how are you? All of the crowd should be wildly saying, "Of course I'm fit." Welcome to the Cal. Now I want to show you what. I want to show you what fit. What do you mean? We all know the weight of law on us, the responsibilities that we have. But if we keep on working at it, no, even people. So get your cameras out. Go ahead. Guys. All right, let's get started. I really like that word fit. It's such a versatile word, right? It means, does something work with something else? Does it fit? A square peg in a square hole, a round peg in a round hole. Do you look fit? Are you healthy? Do your clothes or the setup, or are things working? And so I really like this as a theme because it covers a lot of different ground and gives a lot of room for us to explore lots of different ideas. I really worked hard out. I worked hard to get in this good a shape for the conference this year. So as the dean alluded to, we've been doing this for 36 years. 30 years ago, we had a CD-ROM on the cover or as part of the logo for the conference. 20 years ago, I was talking about ebooks in legal education, and we launched the E-Langdell project at that time, 20 years ago, right? Rip, mix, learn, how clever. And today, I'm really glad that Michigan is the 20th law school, if you don't count Zoom there, is the 20th law school for us to visit for this conference. I want to start by thanking them for hosting us. We've always been a weird conference, right? We go to law schools where hopefully they've built a new building, at least we used to, because new buildings used to mean new technology. But even coming to schools where the building is 170 years old, 1860, 150 years old, is worth the visit. And Ann Arbor is beautiful. I want to thank our sponsors, whom without we could not upgrade the food a little bit, and keep the price low of this conference. We know travel budgets are super tight. And so we want people who are usually not able to afford going to a conference. This can be their conference, right? I want to thank my board of directors, of many of whom are here right now. I see Steve and Marjorie. And I especially want to point out Kaz Laskowski and Michael Whiteman, who are brand new to the board of directors just in the last few months. Sorry, I have to do this. Oh, here we go. It's the roids. I want to thank the speakers for which we wouldn't have an agenda. We really like nerds. We like speakers who say, I did something and it worked or it didn't work, and I want to talk about it. And I think you'll find that there's a lot of that on the agenda this time, is people who have tried stuff, people who have messed around with stuff, people who are going to iterate on these problems that are at the intersection of technology and legal education. I want to thank my staff, especially that buff guy over there. And I especially want to point out Hans, our latest staff member. Hans, are you in the room? Hans is in the back over there. Be sure to say hi to Hans, give him a fist bump, welcome him to Cali. Notice I didn't try to pronounce the entirety of your name. I don't have an updated one for this year yet, but I'll probably have it at the raffle. But this is the point where I say, how many people are here for the first time at a Cali conference? Holy smoke, it's like about half the room. So, yeah. So I'm assuming you decided to come because somebody else said, "Ooh, you should go to the Cali conference. It's fun." And I hope we're starting off with that sort of on the right foot. How many have been to, let's say, more than 5, but less than 10 conferences? A couple of you. How many of you have been more than 20 conferences? Ooh. All right, now I get to show off. How many of you have been to all Cali conferences? Since Tom Bruce retired, I've been able to pull that joke off. Tours, are there tours? I meant to ask Scott. Are there tours? And so usually this slide is like 5 years old, but it's the same every year. Meet like at noon at the library desk. Where the break tables are, which is meet right here where you got your name badge at noon. You always, and what the deal is, you get a half hour. Lunch is an hour and a half, so you get a half hour to eat, and then you can go on a tour after that. Yeah, and ignore the bottom half of that slide. There is no tech tour, right? All right. You'll notice that there are, like, the breaks are kind of long, right? They're half hour, lunch is an hour and a half. That's by design, right? We want you to talk to each other. So nerds tend to be kind of introverted, but it turns out that social interaction is good for you. So I'm going to help you out a little bit. If you see a couple of people talking, or if you see someone across the room and you don't know how to start a conversation, I give you permission to go up to anybody and just say, "John told me to talk to you. So what's the topic?" All right. So it's perfectly all right to do that for the next couple of days, is to have a chat with anybody here. Chances are they have a story, or they have an idea, or they have something going on, because we all have the collective knowledge of working in this weird place called law schools, right? And that was the original goal. The first conference was called Conference for Law School Computing Professionals. There weren't any professionals at the time. And we did later drop that to Conference for Law School Computing. And then we just dropped all that and just started calling it CALIcon. And that seems to work a lot better, right? All right. There is a reception-ish, tonight-ish at 6-ish to 9-ish at the garage bar. There'll be a free drink if you find a Cali staffer and if you yell the secret phrase at them. The Wi-Fi is mguest. Does not require a username or a password. Any session changes, Actually, your best bet, by the way, the website got kind of borked on us. So your best bet is the Google Doc, which will always have the latest information on it. All right. And I believe that got emailed out to you, and the website now points to the Google Doc. Ah, technology. All right. There's a raffle Friday after the closing presentation. You don't have to be there to win. But staff, board, and sponsors are not eligible. Sorry, not sorry. All right. A lot of cool stuff at the raffle. Raffle's sort of a unique thing that we do at this conference, right? We got Kit Kats and stickers. We got toolkits and laser levels. And we've got books, Hack Your Bureaucracy, and water bottles, and keyboard cleaners, of course, and first aid kits. And a couple of plush Rockies have been added to the raffle. Amaze, amaze, amaze. See, I knew some people would get that one. All right. All right. And we've got a bunch of gift cards due to the generosity of Tim Stanley and Stacy and the Free Law folks. Thank you very much, Tim. So let's have a conference. Our opening speaker is going to be talking about AI. Imagine that. And as you know, in the adoption curve, we're way past the mass media hype begins. Actually, we're still in the middle of all the mass media hype about AI, right? We're well into the negative press begins. And we're even past the second and third generation products that are available to us. So what is AI for us? Is it just another tool, or is it this changes everything? Well, I got really interested in what Greg was doing because he was going to lay it on the line. He was going to teach a real doctrine course, not just a seminar, not just a coalition of a few willing students, but a real doctrine course. And he was going to do it integrating AI in all aspects of the course. And when I read his paper back in, I'm going to say January, I said, I wonder if you'd be willing to speak at the conference with a sort of a post-mortem. And so I reached out to him and he said, sure, I'd be happy to. And so I'm very interested to hear what he has to say. I think I even said to him, you know, for 100 years, we've called this Langdellian legal education. You know, after your class, we'll be calling it Duhlian legal education, right? Let's find out. So without ado, Greg, I will now tab over and get you started. Yep.
Thanks, John, for having me. I've been very busy on my Peloton, working out in preparation for this conference, and I've also practiced my social interaction, so I should be improved if you want to talk to me. So I got my interest in this project from what I consider my two passions in legal education. One is access, both extending access to students who can have a legal education, extending access and providing better learning for the students that are in a law school, and also just strong, good pedagogy where we are actually measuring our learning outcomes and assessing whether students are learning. And while I was at Mitchell Hamline School of Law, I took a new job on Monday. I am now teaching at Purdue Global, which used to be Concord. And just as a way of background why I'm doing that, I think there's a huge access barrier in legal education with the high costs. And I'm hoping to be part of the first online law school that receives ABA accreditation, because legal education could be a lot less expensive. And that's very exciting to me. The other reason I took this position, which relates to this talk as well, is that there is a very small collegial faculty. All the curriculum is centralized, which means I'm the course lead on contracts. I decide the contracts curriculum for all 300 students. And my buddy's designing the torts curriculum, and we talk every day. So there's the potential to do what I've always wanted to do, and that's coordinate across the curriculum within the classes, and then be able to assess how well we are doing. And particularly for AI, this is an exciting prospect for me because it's not just one class that I can experiment with, but I can work with my colleagues to experiment over a whole curriculum. So as a confession, I know very little about technology. I know very little about artificial intelligence. I am not a big user of AI, and I was never a big user in AI. One benefit we have at Mitchell Hamline that we now have at Purdue Global is we have instructional designers. When we designed our hybrid program in 2015, we built an in-house instructional design department. Now we have 6 full-time instructional designers at Mitchell Hamline. Purdue Global has more than I can count. And the beauty in this is I can call Amanda, who I work with, and say, I want the students to do an exercise where they train an AI tool how to teach X. And she comes up with 4 or 5 pedagogically strong ways to do that, and then I can choose. But this project did not come out of a love of technology, a love of AI, fidgeting with gadgets, or anything of the like. I am confident that you all know more about AI than I did. But as I said, the two loves where this was built out of is one, Mitchell Hamline was the first ABA-accredited law school to have a hybrid program. I designed the curriculum for that. And I've been very interested in pedagogy, particularly how we can improve learning outcomes among neurodiverse students and first-generation students. That was my passion back in 2015 when people thought that a hybrid law program, wow, that's revolutionary. It wasn't. The rest of higher education was doing it, but in legal education it was. And I said, this is another reckoning. This is another time where people are going to say, this is obvious that we need to be using AI in legal education. So that was the roots of the project, not any love of AI. So what was I trying to do? The first thing is I was trying to figure out what my purpose was in the classroom. I was teaching a secure transactions class. It was an asynchronous class. We had 1 hour of office hours a week. Students were asking me relatively routine questions. What are the 3 elements of attachment? How do you perfect? I was giving my canned answer, the same answer that I've given about 20 times. I knew the students and I just stopped. And I said, what are we doing here? Why do you need me? You could be asking a bot these questions and they would give you the same answers. The bots could grade your assessment. They could write the assessments. They could perform the lectures as well as I can. And to test that, I said to Amanda, I said, can you prepare with AI a secure transactions lecture that is similar to the lecture that I gave and I recorded and we put on Canvas? And within about 5 minutes, she had a lecture that was more effective than my lecture because it had visuals, it had problems. It was much better than I could do. I had to fix 2 inaccuracies, but otherwise it was perfect. So I said, this class could run itself. I'm unneeded. And I thought about retiring. I said, I did. I said, I am not going to be able to add value in this new generation of legal education. I said, there has to be another way, and I have to find some way to be useful. So the second impetus is I was very frustrated in faculty meetings, very frustrated, because a faculty member would talk about how a student cheated with AI. They used AI to write a paper, or they used AI on an exam, but they couldn't prove it, so they couldn't discipline the student. And then the discussions, as you probably have experienced yourself, went on and on and on, how the students cheat, how they're dishonest, we have to catch them cheating, what are we going to do? They're not going to be prepared as lawyers. And I said, I cannot listen to this anymore. Okay, this is a tool. It's not about cheating prevention. It's about how do we use the tool to help students learn. And it just might mean we have to completely rethink the way we teach. Because if our focus is on catching cheating, we are not educators. And that was, when I first said that, that was scary to people. And people didn't like that. And they didn't like me, because it was much easier for them to focus on how do we prevent cheating than on what AI can do. The third thing is students wanted AI instruction. Students were coming up to me and telling me they designed these bots, they designed these tools to practice for their classes. They use Notebook to organize all of their assignments. But what are we doing as a law school when we're not offering courses in AI? We're not integrating AI in our classes. And it was even more than that. A number of neurodiverse students came up to me and they said, how can this help me? I don't like speaking in class. I get nervous. I get anxious. Isn't there a way this can help me and this could balance the learning? And a lot figured it out for themselves, but they wanted more instruction. And the last thing is there were a lot of standalone classes on AI that schools had, seminars. We had a seminar on AI. And I learned it wasn't how to use AI, it was AI in the law, which is a much different type of class. And I said, how do we use AI and the skill of learning AI literacy to teach doctrinal classes? I mean, this is what legal research and writing professors have been doing for years. They combine the skills and the doctrine. I started out my career teaching legal research and writing, and this is really the same thing. How do we combine the skill of AI literacy with the doctrine that we are teaching? And they asked me to teach a standalone AI class, and I was not the right person to do that because I didn't know anything about AI, but I knew a lot about how we combine skills and doctrine to teach. So the contrast class seemed like a natural starting point. I had taught the same class twice before with the same final exam. It was 100 MBE multiple choice questions on the Themis platform. So I knew I would immediately have data at the end of the term of how the current students did in comparison to past classes of students. Now, there are a lot of other variables, of course, average LSAT score, average GPA, and I'm still analyzing some of that data, or the data that I have access to, but that was at least a starting point. I knew the subject matter. I knew how to teach and what contracts was. This wasn't a class about teaching contracts for me. I was trying to design an experience for the students where they would create a learning community where they would teach and learn contracts from one another. I didn't see myself as the teacher. I was the facilitator designing the experience, and I felt I could only do that if I had some familiarity with the doctrine. I wanted to start with first-year students, and that might have been a mistake. John told me I'm supposed to talk about the failures as well as the successes, so don't worry. There were a number of shortcomings that I didn't expect. But I thought the first-year students would be the most excited, and they wouldn't have a set mindset of how legal education was supposed to work. Actually, I think second and third year students are more excited about AI because they see what they're missing in their other classes. They see what the legal profession is demanding, and they see it as a whole. The first year students are talking to their parents and talking to their grandparents about what legal education is supposed to be like, and what I was offering them was nothing what they were expecting. So I think there was a fair amount of anxiety among the first-year students, and I'll talk a bit about that later, that I absolutely wasn't expecting. And last, contracts is just as good as any other subject to talk about the doctrinal skills mix. And of course, one of the criticisms I got is this isn't a skills class. This isn't an AI class. We're supposed to be learning contracts. Why aren't you teaching us contracts? And I said, of course, I am teaching you contracts, but AI is the tool through which I'm doing so. All right, so what were my specific goals? So on one level, I wanted to produce students who could adapt and be skilled in a legal profession that was changing. I do believe that entry-level jobs, as we traditionally know them, are going to start to decrease. I do believe students who have these technical skills and are trained in AI are going to have a leg up. And I know when students were doing externships and students were applying for jobs, that was a common source of discussion. So I wanted the students to have some training, some literacy in AI that would help them in the workforce. The second goal was, and this kind of brings me back to our hybrid program, I felt that legal education was so far behind where it needed to be. It's kind of like in 2015, we designed the hybrid program. It should have been designed in 2005 when the rest of higher education was going more online. But the ABA in legal education wasn't ready to accept it yet, even though a number of faculty at a number of schools were designing online classes. I thought this was the same thing. The legal profession was changing so quickly and AI was becoming more prevalent that schools thought they had an eternity to start tinkering with their curriculum and incorporating AI. And I thought it needed to happen suddenly and quickly. The third thing is I wanted to improve student learning outcomes. This experiment, or the integration of AI, was going to be a failure if students' performance wasn't as good or better. Because the critics of AI said AI is a distraction. The students aren't going to learn the fundamental skills, and you're doing a disservice to preparing students for the bar exam. And I heard this often. And I had to be mindful that if I couldn't produce results where student learning was the same or better, experiments like this wouldn't be able to continue. And then lastly, I wanted to appeal to diverse subsets of learners. You know, there's a lot of writing on how we need to appeal to neurodiverse students, how we need to educate first-generation students in a different way, how students of color bring different experiences to law school. And I sort of wanted to take all of that writing and figure out a way to actually improve learning for these students. And interestingly, I developed like a focus group of neurodiverse students, and they were some of the most strongest advocates for AI out of any group of students. Same thing with a lot of the first generation students, because students who were scared to ask a professor a question or did not understand it in an answer in the way the professor explained it, had now this opportunity to use AI in this non-high stakes environment and interact with the AI until it got some understanding of the material. So that was really important to me as well. So I set out for a 4-part curricular framework. So the first part was, how are the students all going to participate? And how are we going to assess whether they're learning the fundamental material? And what's going to replace what was historically the Socratic method in law school, where students are being called on one-on-one and kind of having to speak on their feet. Now, we all know the Socratic method is incredibly inefficient. One student out of 60 or 90 is talking at a time. Other students might be paying attention or they might not be paying attention. And many students are scared or they're anxious or they're terrified to be called on in class, as I was when I was a first-year law student. And I thought there was nothing to be gained by calling on a student in a class of 90 who was going to become more terrified from being called on than just sitting there, and it would interfere with their learning. So there's been a lot written about this in different forms, how you sort of create a chatbot to simulate the Socratic method. And rather than having a discussion with the whole class for an hour or an hour and a half, each student could engage in their own Socratic dialogue for 15 or so minutes. The second, and probably the least popular of the experiment, were skills to teach basic AI literacy. And I'll talk more about those specifically in a minute, but that I had them develop a bot. I had them use AI on a bar exam type question. I had them write a judicial opinion. And all of those tools were not designed to teach them how they might use AI in practice, but it was more to expose them to AI and get them to see both the benefits and the drawbacks. And they didn't like that much because they didn't find it as practical as they might have liked. So then the third part, in the second half of the class, I had them do all sorts of simulations with Spellbook. And if you're not familiar with it, Spellbook is a transactional tool that enables lawyers to draft, revise contracts, test contracts for their legality, and to negotiate back and forth. And Spellbook is giving a free license to all law schools. So I got a license for the students, and I was able to have them do what lawyers do. And then the last part is I needed to be able to defend from the criticism that AI distracts from bar exam performance. I also have some responsibility to prepare students for the bar exam. So I gave the students a closed book, closed note, closed internet, 100 multiple choice question final. And I was honest. The goal of that exam was not to integrate AI use. And I created an environment where there couldn't be cheating, where the students would know they couldn't use AI, but they would be prepared for it through all of the AI exercises that they had been doing. So the first part, the foundation, is the Socratic chatbots. We probably did this 6 to 8 times during the semester. They came in at the start of class. Class started at 9:30. 9:30, they took out their computers. They started the chatbot, and they engaged in a Socratic dialogue about that day's material for 15 or 20 minutes. When the 20 minutes was up, they uploaded it to Canvas so I can review it. I had uploaded that day's material so the bot would be conversant in it. Then I found 8 prior contract students of mine, all who did very well in the class, to test each of the bots ahead of time. So it allowed me to reprogram the bots so they were focused on the topics that I wanted them to focus on, and we cleaned up any information that was wrong. I should add, I used an open source casebook, which made it very easy to cut and paste the text and program the bots. So this was great. This is something that the students loved. They could all participate simultaneously. I did nothing. But I facilitated the experience. I prepared the experience, but I just sat there in the front of the room and just watched. They couldn't ask me questions. They had to ask the professor, the bot, the question. It gave me real-time data. I graded these pass-fail, and in about 15 minutes after class, I could skim through these, and I immediately knew where students were having issues. And I could clean up those misperceptions in the next class. So it gave me immediate feedback. It also gave the students immediate feedback. And I told the students if they were struggling with a question, if the bot said, "What is promissory estoppel?" and they didn't know, that should be a light bulb moment for them that they should go back and read Restatement 90 because promissory estoppel was in the reading. Or if there's a question about a case, what's the holding of Hadley v. Baxendale, and they don't know, they probably need to read the case again. But what it also helped me with, and really the last point, is it allowed me to see students who are struggling much earlier. Because occasionally I got blank pages. where the students weren't answering the questions. Or I got pages where the students were entering gibberish, or they were doing passive aggressive things like asking the bot, well, what do you think the answer to the question was? And in those cases, in most of those cases, the student was struggling. So after each class, I was able to write 6 or 7 students, and I told them I was going to do this. And I'd say, Lisa, your page was blank. Let's talk about what is going on. You can't say you're terrified because you're doing this one-on-one. So you probably didn't freeze. It probably wasn't anxiety because it's not being graded. Let's talk about what's going on. And that helped me. It helped me reach out to the students who might have been at the bottom of the class and intervene much more quickly than I would have been able to intervene if I didn't have these assessments. So here were the kind of the 3 assignments I did in the first half of the class. I had the students build a bot that accurately and precisely taught the consideration doctrine. And while part of the purpose was perhaps to teach them how to build a knowledge-generating bot, more of the purpose was to teach them the level of precision and accuracy that the law requires. And what I asked them to do to test it was to ask, 10 or so questions and then read the answer carefully. And the goal isn't to get close to the rules, or the goal is not to get the hypothetical in the ballpark of what the right answer. The goal is to get it precisely right. And AI might not be able to do that without more human intervention. So the real skill that was involved was them getting the output and then having to tinker with the input. So the output matched what a professor or what a human was capable of reproducing. They thought the assignment was easy because they just fed all their notes on consideration and thought they were done in 5 minutes. But they realized the assignment took several hours when they understood the standard that was expected. I wanted to play with how AI could help with bar exam preparation. So I gave them a bar exam question that was on contract formation. It was the exact topic we were covering in class. I had them write it, closed book in class, and then they fed it through AI, and AI gave a very, very, very long critique. And then their job was to rewrite the essay incorporating the AI feedback. And I think in most cases, they were able to produce a better essay with the AI incorporated feedback than they were without it. And I was sort of testing if a method of bar preparation is for AI to evaluate essays and give students feedback. And I think it was successful at that with some limitations that I will talk about. The last thing I did is I sort of wanted to test research and writing skills. So I work with our reference librarians who are adept, much more so than I am, at all the AI research tools. And I had them do an assignment where they had to write a judicial opinion using AI. And I went to law school with a gentleman named Robert McBurney. He is now a judge in Superior Court in Fulton County, Georgia. And he live streams all his arguments. And I'm kind of addicted to the live stream. Okay, I watch trials, I watch hearings, but it's great because I teach evidence and you have all the evidentiary rulings like in real time. So I'll watch a trial during the day and then I'll have to change my lesson for the next day because there's this great example of hearsay. And by the end of any class, the students are addicted as well. And what they say is they learn more from watching the courtroom than they do in class. And I think that's true. Well, anyway, I was watching a summary judgment hearing on whether a contract existed. Is it an agreement to agree, or is it a contract? And Judge McBurney was hearing the case on summary judgment, and it was very boring, but I'm like, wow, this would be perfect for contracts. So I wrote them. I got the pleadings. I got the complaint, the answer. I let the students watch the oral argument, and then they had to write the opinion using AI. Well, I assigned them each to a different state because I didn't want them talking to each other. I thought the law on what's a contract in all states had to be fairly similar, and there wasn't a right answer to the problem anyway, so it didn't really matter. I gave them the actual pleadings. When they asked me questions about the actual pleadings, I said, I'm not answering them. You're the judge. You have to write the opinion. Do what a lawyer would do. Then I had them have AI do the first draft. And my reference librarians wrote instructions if they wanted to use Westlaw or they wanted to use Lexis, the proper way to do it, how to do prompt engineering, how to revise the prompts, and how to get a good first draft of the opinion. And then, of course, what they were required to do is they were required to edit the draft opinion and to verify, of course, all of the citations. I told them that if they cite to a citation that doesn't exist, they will fail the assignment. I couldn't exactly follow through on that because I wasn't going to search 1,500 citations in 50 different jurisdictions to check them. But I think they did it fairly seriously. And then I had them hand in both the AI-produced draft and their edits. And I told them that I was grading them part on their finished product. What does the opinion read like? And secondly, on how they use AI and do they understand, do they value AI's limits and then the human contribution. So I got 60 opinions from 50 different states that were produced in part with AI and produced in part with human judgment. So the spellbook assignments were the type of assignments that you might see in a transactional course. And yes, this is a lot to put in a first-year contracts class, but I'm really not doing a lot of teaching because I'm just orchestrating the experience. So there are time for other things. So they first had to draft a non-disclosure agreement and use AI to critique it. And I gave them a form. So this wasn't something they had to do from scratch. They then used AI to draft an employment agreement that met certain parameters. And then they had to pare down the draft and make it usable. The big assignment they did is they did a commercial lease negotiation where two students represented the landlord, two students represented the tenant. They did research. They interviewed the bot, who was their client. They negotiated a resolution. They drafted the final product. They redlined it. They negotiated back and forth. And at the end of the class, they turned in hopefully a signed settlement agreement. I didn't do that much that week. I didn't. I spent a lot of time preparing the assignment, teaching them how to use Spellbook, programming the bots so they would work, make the assignments clear, and then I left them to their own devices for a week with some structured activities that they have to do. And that they loved because that made them see more than anything else how lawyers use AI, because they could talk to employers, talk to extern supervisors, all of whom who were familiar with Spellbook, and they said they can use it how lawyers use it. Would this have been a better exercise in their second or third year after they've had contracts under their belt and some more advanced courses? Maybe. They might have benefited more. But in terms of them gaining appreciation for what AI can do and how it's used in practice and what its limitations are, that was pretty rewarding. So in addition to the AI assignments, which I graded, I gave them 500 practice multiple choice questions over the semester. They also could, of course, generate their own with AI. At the end of each unit, I gave them a multiple choice quiz. And then at the end of the semester, they had the 100-question closed book exam. I wanted them to have enough questions to be able to practice on, to check whether they were learning what they thought they were learning, in order to perhaps reassure them that the final exam was a fair assessment of their learning in the class. And of course, as you all have experienced, the students never think they have enough practice questions. So when they told me 500 questions were not enough, then I taught them how to generate more questions on their own. And then they started generating questions in their other classes and realized they could practice in other classes. All right, so now we get to the part of the presentation where I'm talking about what worked and what might not have worked and could be tweaked for future iterations. So, key wins. I have not fully crunched the data. So that's a disclaimer. But I gave this same exact exam twice before, once in 2025 and once in 2023. And the median final exam score from these students was 3.7 points higher than the 2025 exam and 3.2 points or questions higher than the 2023 exam. My impression was the unit quizzes were also the same, and I believe students were doing better on those. They might have actually been doing better on the quizzes than I even expected. So I'm at least fairly comfortable that AI did not impede their learning, and it might have actually helped their learning. It wasn't a disaster. Some of my colleagues said that the median would drop 10 or 15 questions because I'm not teaching them anything. And I got over that hurdle. And actually, one student complained to the vice dean and said, I didn't learn anything about contracts all term. All I learned about was AI. Well, this data was fairly powerful. I'm a little concerned the student didn't realize they were learning something about contracts, but that's another issue. The self-assessments via bots, really exciting, worked really well, much better than the Socratic method has ever worked. Now, the problem is, if you have a class for an hour and a half, and you usually teach it by the Socratic method, after 15 minutes, the students have interacted with the bot, they've had their dialogue, and you have to fill the other hour and 15 minutes. So that was a new phenomenon, that there was all this time to do other things. And I gave them a lot of that time to work on some of these projects. But you really could reduce an hour and a half of teaching to 15 or 20 minutes, and you had the data to know whether students were understanding it. The students understood by the end the frustrations and the limitations of AI. They did not leave this class thinking AI is a panacea and AI is going to take over the practice of law. They had to do a lot of editing and a lot of fact-checking of AI's work product. AI produces very bloated content for these assignments, much longer and much more in depth than it needs to be, and they learned the importance of editing. So not one student came out of that class and said, AI is going to do all the legal work of the future. So I felt good about that they understood the limitations. This is also just a hypothesis from my preliminary look at the data, but it mirrors studies by Dan Schwartz and others. I think AI helped students at the bottom of the class more than students at the top of the class with the multiple choice, the doctrine acquisition, the analysis. I think students at the top of the class were more inclined to say, AI doesn't help me. I can get an A or A minus or a B plus without AI. Where the students in the bottom half of the class, or maybe even the bottom 2/3, saw AI as bringing them up and teaching them in certain ways how to be better law students and how to be better lawyers. Now, they all liked the spellbook simulation, but the actual literacy exercises, really the weaker students found more benefit than the stronger students. And I think the data on the final is going to reflect that. I think what we are going to see is the stronger students, or the top third, it stayed steady from year to year, but it's the bottom half, maybe the bottom 2/3, that actually went up from the prior 2 years. But stay tuned. As I said, the real world engagement, they loved the spellbook. They've loved the simulations in the past. We use the same landlord-tenant dispute in our capstone week in our blended program, and the students love it there. They even loved it more with the AI tool. They got really, really into it. Again, I didn't see them for a week. So the only thing I got out of this was the final work product. I was a little bit scared. I mean, I programmed the clients, and then I let the clients go. Those were AI. And then I just kind of let the students go to their own devices, telling me what the deliverables were. And the final work product was really good. The research was good. The drafting was good. The revisions were good, because they had actually sort of learned about AI's benefits and weaknesses. And I actually feel that they used it, in a pretty meaningful way. And a big uplift, which I did not expect, is they started using AI in all their classes. Well, they might have used it unethically, but what they told me about was they were using it to create outlines. They were using it to create flashcards. They were using it to create study tools. They were using it for the bar exam. And it did create a bit of fear among other faculty, because students would come in and says, oh, I'm using AI to prepare for your final. I did not expect that. I did not expect AI to be such a benefit to what we might think of as academic support and we might think of as bar exam preparation. But all of a sudden, students had an endless number of multiple choice questions to practice on. And for bar exam purposes and academic support purposes, the questions are fairly accurate. And when the students are interested in repetition, they're fairly good. And I'm sure many of you have used Notebook more than I have, but their outlines, their flashcards, really, really impressive. And they immediately applied some of this to their other classes. I was shocked. I was actually shocked. All right, now we're getting to the part of what did not work. Some of these scared John. I did show him ahead of time, but honesty. So some of the strongest students, some of them were frustrated. As I said, especially on those literacy assignments, they say, why am I using AI? Because AI produces B or B minus work. I actually think B minus work on a lot of these assignments, and I want to get an A. And AI doesn't help me, it distracts me. I think that's a valid criticism. I think that for a student to realize that in certain contexts, they are stronger than AI is kind of a powerful learning moment, but I was surprised by it. I was surprised. There were some students who were so angry about AI that they couldn't focus on the class. I got an email from a student before the class started. He said, AI is destroying the environment. AI is destroying the world. The whole tech sector is going to collapse financially. I refuse to use AI. I eventually came up with some compromises for him, but that anti-AI sentiment was fairly strong among several students. The way I responded to it is I said, I don't actually like AI either. My life was a lot easier when I started teaching. I taught entirely differently. I am not placing a value judgment on whether AI is good or bad. What I'm trying to do is prepare you to be lawyers. And if you have such and anathema, such a moral opposition to AI, you might have trouble finding a job. So that's the way I spun it. I said, we're not going to talk about whether AI is good or bad, because I don't like it in many ways. So that surprised me, though, and those students were really mad. This made John the most nervous. The grading complexity. I didn't know what I got myself into, but I had the students for the literacy and the spell book assignments give me the human work product, give me the AI work product, and then have track changes so I can see what they changed. And this caused hundreds of hours of grading. Now, I didn't have to do a lot of teaching, so I can make it up with spending time on grading, but it's not efficient. It's just not possible to do that much grading. I'm happy I did it because I saw how much work students were doing. I saw how much the students had to edit down the bloated AI content. I saw the students were doing the fact checking, but it was unmanageable. I think next time what I would do is use more of the Socratic bots, because those are pass-fail. Make some of the assignments pass-fail. Certainly could do more peer reviews. And I think the next kind of frontier, and we're there, is what kind of grading can AI do? Can AI administer an oral exam? We certainly can have AI grade bar exam essays, and they're pretty accurate. So I think we are at the point where we can be using AI to assess students. I wouldn't say that publicly at a faculty meeting. And I'm not sure I would necessarily tell the students, but I think AI is probably more conscientious than a lot of law professors and can do a pretty good job grading. So we need to make it more manageable. There was a lot of instruction anxiety. Students were just anxious by the instructions. The instructions were very, very detailed. My instructional designer spent hours and hours, step by step by step. And if anyone wants the assignments, just email me and I'm happy to send them to you. But the students were still anxious. You want me to run this through AI? And I said, yeah, that's what the assignment says. The assignment says, go into your ChatGPT account and plug it into AI. They're like, well, I'm not sure we can do that. I'm like, well, I'm telling you to do it. So there was a lot of anxiety. So I got a lot of questions, not about content, but about kind of pastoral care. And I should have added, what we required the students to do is get a ChatGPT monthly account. It was $20, but I gave them an open source casebook. So they only had to spend $20 a month for the class. I think I thought about asking the law school to pay for it. And if I thought about it in advance, I probably would have done so. But I made it cost effective for the students by not requiring them to get a casebook, but cost could be an issue. They had a lot of trouble, or some of the students had a lot of trouble editing AI work. It's very bloated. A bar exam essay that should be maybe 3 pages, students got back 9 pages or 12 pages. And I think how to edit that down, how to refine the prompts to get more what they want was difficult for them, especially some of the weaker students. They did fairly well, but they need a lot more practice on it. And I didn't expect that. I thought that it would be fairly easy for them to edit the AI work product and make it their own, but some students struggle with that. And their final bar exam essays, and a ME question should maybe be a type page and a half, 2 pages. I get 10 pages. And I'm like, you have 19 issues here. There's only 2 issues in the problem. And they'd have, but it was a learning experience because you don't put 19 issues in an ME answer. So they needed to learn a little more how to cut it down. And this sort of just gives, again, the student experience spectrum. I can say that what the students were all excited about was doing the spell book simulations. I think students, particularly in the lower half of the class, were excited about how AI helped them and what it meant for their learning. I think they felt more confident that they can do better in their classes because they know what to do. They don't have to make an appointment with academic support, though they can. They don't need to make an appointment with their advisor, but they can just do more practice problems. So I think those were probably the two benefits. As I said, the upper half of the class or upper third didn't really care for the AI literacy. And then we had the anxious students and the resistant students. So what's AI's immediate impact on legal education? I think regardless of whether a faculty member integrates it in their course, it can help students organize class material, again, in all of their classes, generate practice questions, and it will be able to do next-gen questions for the bar exam once we train it. They have unlimited practice questions. They can say whether they're easy, medium, or difficult. They can specify whether it's multiple choice or true, false. They can get essay feedback on demand. That if they, look, it's not as thoughtful as feedback as their legal research and writing professor would give, but it's helpful enough for the bar exam. And it's this powerful tool for academic support and bar exam preparation. And what we're going to do at Purdue is we are going to create sort of a pre-1L module or a pre-1L program, and we're going to teach students how to use AI to be a better law student if they want. How to use AI to create more practice problems, how to use AI to prepare for the bar exam, how to use AI to organize their notes. I think that's the most immediate impact that schools can capitalize on. I think there has to be a commitment to teach AI literacy across all the required courses. I'm not confident that having AI as a standalone course is enough. So I think ideally it would happen in the required courses in the first and second year. I think the faculty that are doing most of the work on AI are librarians and legal research and writing faculty. That is not surprising because they have experience mixing skills and doctrine. It's unfortunate that many doctrinal faculty believe they can delegate to other people to teach AI literacy, but where you're seeing and you know this, where you're seeing the most movement in this field in AI literacy is among librarians and legal research and writing professors. Then there's a couple, doctrinal professors who are bringing this into the core courses. I think there needs to be curriculum mapping where it is clear what AI skills are being taught in what courses. And last, what I am excited about at Purdue Global, which has been very, very hard to do at Mitchell Hamline and is very hard to do at most schools, is we can curriculum map and we can centralize the curriculum. So we can decide as a faculty, what are we going to include in contracts? What are we going to include in torts? We don't have to vote. We don't have to fight. The 10 of us just get together and we make a decision. And I think that has potential. And I think there's a lot that legal education as a whole will be able to learn from that. And then I think advanced courses are the place to teach specialized skills, specialized aid tools. And let me say this, the problem with the AI tool providers, Spellbook, is they license the tools, they don't license the pedagogy. And I've seen a lot of my colleagues say, oh, this is a flashy tool. I will give this to the students to use. But there's no pedagogy. In the sample exercises that Spellbook gives us, they just write the assignment. There's no rubrics, there's no explanation, there's no instructions. So I think we have found that, instructional designers have been a huge benefit in bridging that gap between AI tools and pedagogy. Or I think that faculty are going to have to become, those that aren't, well-trained in pedagogy. Again, legal research and writing professors, librarians already have this, but I don't think we can have doctrinal professors experimenting with AI tools without thinking about how they're going to integrate them in their courses. And the AI tool providers don't provide that at all. So that is a gap that needs to be met if these tools are going to be used. So I think the hard problems ahead, faculty coordination, which is always a problem. I think to do this right, faculty have to coordinate. The thing that scares me the most and makes me think I'm going to retire again is that AI evolves faster than a legal curriculum can. And, I've invested a lot of time in this, and probably I'll get back home and I'll have to figure something else out. And that's scary, especially for many faculty, that you can't figure this out over 3 years and expect it to be the same. So I think that's a huge challenge. The field is faster than we can keep up. Pedagogical gaps. I think the AI tools don't come with pedagogy wrapped in a box, and I think that's a challenge. And we got to think more about grading. The immediate work we have to do, and I know some of you already done it, is how do we use AI to grade and not let our colleagues and students find out about it. What this means for the legal profession, graduates must be AI literate. That's the minimum. It's not that they can use the tools. It's that they understand the benefits and the drawbacks of AI. That's more important than any tool. And that editing AI output is a hard skill. It's a hard skill. And that's one that we're going to have to spend a lot of time teaching, because you get a lot of bloat and you get a lot of inaccuracy. And maybe, the lesson that was most striking about this is students came away with the understanding that human judgment remains irreplaceable. Not one student came out of the class thinking that AI can do it all. And they all recognized the role of humans. And that kind of made me feel good, because the last thing I wanted to do was make them think by the end of the semester that they were obsolete and they should get a refund for their tuition. So I do think they realize the importance of human judgment. And you can see some of the lessons learned. I am just kind of summarizing what I talked about. I'm doing a session with Heidi this afternoon. My role will primarily be to answer questions about this presentation, criticisms, anything that you want to talk about. So we'll have time for that. I'm happy to provide the slides, and I'm happy to provide the data and the exercises. The data is going to have to wait a couple months, but I'm also happy to provide the exercises. And I don't know if this already exists, but just like the legal research and writing professors have like a data bank for exercises, it might be, maybe this already exists, but it'd be nice to have a data bank where folks can share AI exercises. And if that exists or somebody forms one, I'm happy to contribute to that. So I appreciate you all engaging. I look forward to hearing your questions, your feedback. This was fun. I didn't realize how much publicity it would get. I was just writing a law review article and teaching a class. Then somehow it got on social media. And, some people say, and John joked that this is a new method of legal education. It's not a new method of legal education. It's a tool to do what we've always done, and it's a tool that we need to learn because it's what we've always done. So this is dramatically changing legal education, but only in a limited way. And I think access, outcomes, preparing students for the practice of law are still here.
That was wonderful. We have absolutely no time for questions in here, but fortunately we're doing a making of this keynote at 1 o'clock. He's got a session at that point, and so grab him then. The rest of the sessions are across the street. There's 3 classrooms over there. I don't know where to point exactly, but they're not in this building. And the food also, the break food, the snack food is also over there. Of course, there's snacks between every single session, except this one. 10:30. Yeah, we can make it. We can make it and stay on time.
And if you want to share this session, we will have it up on our YouTube channel within a week, as I imagine you want to do that. Thanks.